8:32, we'll convene the Mendocino County Retirement Association board session. And first thing on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Jeff, do you want to lead us to the pledge?
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, next on our agenda is public comments. Members of the public are welcome to comment. At this point, I'm not seeing any members of the public in the audience. So we'll go on to the consent calendar. Matters in the consent calendar are to be approved with one action. So we have on the consent calendar minutes of July 18th, the July 2018 retirement report, and the preliminary monthly financial report. Are there any comments or questions about those reports or minutes? Andy, you want to add?
No comments, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Well, then, by consent, they'll be approved. Next, we have the agenda is the discussion of possible action regarding investment matters. We have the preliminary monthly investment report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trustees, you have the preliminary monthly investment report from Callan in your board materials. You can see that at the end of July 2018, market value stood at $529 million. Was a good month. We were total fund was up 1.68%, although that is slightly behind the benchmark. We do have the figures for fiscal year 18. They're not in your materials, but we just got them earlier this week. Our our portfolio return for the fiscal year was 9.48%, well ahead of the benchmark return of 8.57. So we had a really good year all the way around. Really happy with that. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have about the monthly investment report.
Just for clarification for the audience, so our target was 7.25, but the benchmark of other organizations with a similar portfolio was 8. You said 8 something.
So the benchmark return was 8.57. That's not. So that is based on our asset allocation and our comparable indexes compared to our allocation. Our assumed rate of return is actually 7. We earned 9.48% for fiscal year 2018. So.
I see we have, almost 29% of our portfolio on international stuff.
Yes, sir.
And I'm wondering, with the 40% drop in the Turkish currency, is that bode for a potential, like Asian contagion, like we had a couple decades ago that really caused a lot of trouble? And if so, are we talking to our advisors about being in a protective, defensive mode on that?
So I would say there's questions within the questions there, and if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think there are some significant differences between the Asian financial crisis of the 90s and 2000s and what you're talking about here with the Turkish currency. The financial crisis in Asia was centered around Japan, which is a very significant global economy. Turkey is not that significant. As far as international investments, I'm much more concerned about the trade wars, and I think that may be what's driving a lot of what we're seeing right now. Our investment managers are very aware of the politics involved with the trade wars and are watching those kinds of issues. In terms of at the asset allocation level making any changes, that's not something that I think we want to try to time. That's much more of a tactical decision. If you're trying to avoid international equities right now because of trade wars, that's a tactical decision. We try to focus on the strategy, and long term, I still think international investments are going to pay off. We want to stay in that space, and just ride that. We know it's a more volatile investment area than domestic equities typically, but there is a higher expected return to compensate for that. So that I tend to think about it much more strategically. Is 29% the right number? And then if it is, if it's not, why or why not? And what do we want to do with that? Raise it or lower it? And then build, once we decide on that number, then build the portfolio in there. And that's, that would be on deck for the asset allocation that we will do in early 2019, after the RFP's done. So that would be my response to it is, at our level, we don't want to try to time the market or move defensively or this or that kind of tactical decision. We want to make the big picture strategic, long-run investment decisions. So that's where we try to focus our time and efforts here.
So we make a motion to approve the best reports, or we accept
No
it?
need, no need for that.
Okay, and then on discussion regarding 2018 U.S. Public Pension Governance Survey results that are in our packet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trustees, you have the information provided here. I think I provided a lot of this background in the memo, but last year I was contacted by this group, Fund Governance Analytics, and began some conversations with them. Obviously, the board's aware that governance is a big topic that I have a great deal of interest in. Some discussions there, learned of their research, looked at some of what they're doing. Very interested in that. This year they came out with a survey to start measuring governance across public funds. I was happy to participate in the survey. Specific to MSARA. So it was, what do our governance practices look like? Included in the materials there are a very summary level article from a magazine about their research and some of their important findings. I also included the survey instrument for your reference, and I responded to the survey, sent all of the information in. And then the very last thing in the packet is the comparison of where our governance score is compared to other U.S. public funds. And I think you can see that we hold up fairly well in that comparison. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, we see within this survey that we're ranking in well above in the upper levels of the first quartile, or 20% actually, of all organizations, similar organizations. Do you, based on your filling out the answers for the survey, where are the areas you think we're stronger than is the average?
That's a good question.
And I guess where are some areas for improvement, I guess?
I didn't get that level of feedback on this. There may be an opportunity for us to, I can certainly find out what it would take for us to get that detailed level response. What we've gotten so far was free. For that next level, there may be a cost involved, but I wanted to share this with you because it was free, and I thought it was good news that we're doing things well. But I don't have that next level of the crosstabs of where we're high and where we're low. So, but I can find out what it would take to get that.
Have you discussed with any colleagues if they filled this out, how they did?
I have not. I have not.
What kind of question, or kind of information did you give them?
So the questionnaire is in the materials there.
So you just answered those questions?
I answered the questions, yes.
That's what you said, and the interesting thing about that is it's all small letters.
Interesting, one question they have is, when's your fiscal year? I didn't know there was more than one fiscal year. I guess federal fiscal year and state fiscal year.
Well, Sonoma County's on a calendar fiscal year.
You have the first letter.
We were, never mind, I guess you know.
Okay, and if you still, I was just gonna say,
Okay, any other questions or comments on the survey?
Okay, sure.
So do you think it's worth getting any more information from them?
We can find out what it would, what if any fee there would be to see, the detail, and I can bring that back to the board.
That would be a good thing.
Okay.
Right, thanks. Next is discussion of possible action regarding amendments to the retirement administrator's charter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trustees, you have, this comes back to you after being on the agenda last month, and it was pulled in so that we could do some further work. We bring it back to you today, and you've seen this document twice. I have thought about this quite a bit in the past several weeks. And did some checking very recently to see what our counterparts across the other 37 Act plans do with the title of their, the individual that reports to the Board of Retirement. 11 of those have a title of CEO. 6 of those have a retirement administrator title, and 3 have executive director as their title. So it's all over the map. I know there have been some concerns about having the CEO title that's here and any possible confusion with the county CEO. With all of that said, I would not be at all adverse to doing, we presented this because we had talked about this issue before. If it's the pleasure of the board to leave this be, to change it to retirement CEO or just executive director, I think if I had to rank order those, I would probably say executive director might be the best option. Retirement CEO would probably be the least favored option for us to pursue, based on everything I know today. When we put this together, I had thought about retirement CEO would be the better option, but now I think it's executive director. The titles are a distinction with really no difference. So, or we can not do anything and just keep going down the road as we are. I really don't care.
So it doesn't have anything to do with the duties. Like I know the CEO for the county, CEO and CAO are very different. They have different responsibilities, different duties. It doesn't affect the retirement system whatsoever, right?
Correct.
I mean, it makes no difference what it is.
Right.
Okay.
Then I'd like to suggest you bring this back to us next month as executive director, if that is,
Well, I think if we wanted to do that, we could just
do it right
correct it and
now.
approve it now, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't have any objection to the executive director title. I mean, it seems like if it solves all those problems and it works for everybody, then if we could amend it, I'd be fine with that.
Is that a motion, Patrick?
Is it a motion?
I'll move to amend
And I'll
to
second.
executive director.
I would like some discussion
Sure.
on the motion. I would like to have a little bit of background on how you would benefit from this change and how the retirement board would benefit from this change, as well as the retirees.
Absolutely. I'll start with, the benefit to me, I mean, it looks a little bit better to have a title other than retirement administrator. Honestly, administrator feels more,
Just one step above manager?
yes, yes. And really, I don't feel that it reflects the work that I do here. I do manage the office, but there's a lot more leadership that I do than management, to be perfectly honest. So I think a title that fits that level of what I do, it better reflects the job that I do here and my performance levels, and it also looks better to the outside world. That's also, I think, a benefit to the organization to have an executive level title reporting to this board. And as we've talked about, someday I will no longer be here. This board will be trying to find a replacement. And if you're recruiting for an executive level title, you have a better opportunity to entice high quality candidates than if you're recruiting for an administrator title, in my opinion. So that's the advantage for me and for the board. What does it mean for our members?
No impact.
I don't really see any significant impact except for, what we've already talked about, able to attract better candidates in the future. And I mean, it does bring a little bit more prestige potentially to the organization. So
And what is the financial impact?
it's zero. I mean, unless I'm missing something, I see no financial impact to this.
Sell those business cards you got to
You gotta-
Negative
I think I have
$20. Yeah.
6. We print our own,
Yeah, right.
and I don't keep a large quantity at all.
Okay,
So-
Since this position is on the Board of Supervisors, can't think what they call it.
Position allocation table.
Allocation table. Is this something that HR has to look at to see if your duties reflect the different position because we put together the retirement administrator position based on the job description.
Right.
Does HR have to look at this and see that the position is more of a executive officer than
So-
an administrator?
There are two, if I may, Mr. Chairman, there are two pieces to my response to that. The first is the last time that the board and I negotiated a new contract, we did make changes to the job description for the retirement administrator to reflect that it is much more of a leadership type of position rather than administrative position. So those changes in reflecting leadership are already in the retirement administrator job description. Will the human resources need to review this? They will, and I, before ever entertaining the note, bringing this to the board, I did speak with county HR and asked what would it take to change the job title here. And the response I got was there would need to be something in writing from the board adopting the job title, and then a letter from the chair requesting that, and then the HR department would take whatever steps they need to take, and it would go through the Board of Supervisors. So.
When I first came on this board, I was really surprised that you were called a retirement administrator. Hardly any other retirement administrators might hear this, but it seems like a kind of a demeaning title and does not describe what you do, James. CEO is what was used in the other boards that I have been aware of, but if having once been both administrator and executive director of a private group and a state board, a couple of them, I'm very much in favor of the change to executive director. Retirement CEO seems odd. So, to me, that answers a couple of concerns.
Any more comments? We do have a motion on the table.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Was there a second?
Yes, I second.
Okay, my apologies.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So then we're on to discussion regarding administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trustees, you have the administrative report before you, and there's a number of topics, and I did want to talk about some of these. The response to the fires on the part of MSARA. As you all know, we've been through a lot of issues over the past several weeks. Fortunately, a lot of those have worked out and gotten themselves resolved. Katie's back in her home now. Stan and his wife are doing well with new child. Stan is back in the office on a part-time basis now, helping us prepare for the audit, which is rapidly approaching. Yeah, we're back to 100% and got everything moving in the right direction, we hope. I did want to point out that I was very happy with staff response to the emergency and how we dealt with that. The work that we've put in on building the business continuity plan was very helpful. In addition to the business continuity plan, we've also put a lot of time and effort into building a procedures manual. While that project is not complete, we focused on critical processes first. So we had the necessary documentation to get everything done that needed to be done at end of month to make sure that all the benefits got paid. And there were steps that we were still doing in the first part of the week immediately after the fires started. We normally set up the direct deposit file well in advance of the last day of the month. We'll usually set that up 4 or 5 days ahead of time. But one of the last steps is we have to submit the positive pay file, and that still had to be done on that Monday after the fire started. So a lot of stuff to get done. We got everything taken care of. Backups worked, everything. We were very, very happy with it. I have started thinking about, at the suggestion of county facilities, we may want to consider obtaining a backup generator for the building. As we've learned through the recent events, power outages are a distinct possibility, and we need to be able to continue functioning if that's what we need. And one of the concerns we had early in the week after the fire started was, would we lose power? So
Did you not lose it here at all?
we did not lose power here during our hours of operation. Or maybe
Probably over the
briefly.
weekend, probably,
Okay.
yeah, probably over the weekend maybe, for sure.
Yeah. So we'll be looking at that, getting some information. We'll bring that back to discuss with the board, because that'll be a budget amendment if that's something that I think we need to do.
I have a question on the first part of this. When CalSTRS decided that we were all going to get electronic transfers, no more paper checks or anything, CalSTRS just did it, and retirees had no choice. We obviously have some that cause a great deal more work and difficulty in a situation like this. Why can CalSTRS do it for, the 200,000 employees or retirees, and we can't do it for 1,000?
I'm operating from memory here in answering this question, and we all remember how difficult that is for me. There's a number of issues at hand there. There may be a legal issue that we might not be able to force our retirees to go to direct deposit legally. I have some vague recollection of that. There's also the customer service issue. it's something we could consider. There are difficulties with it. I know I was part of the process in the state of Oklahoma when we went to all electronic payments, no more paper checks for anything. In any population in any large population that you have to deal with as a government where you're sending checks, there will be a percentage of that population that is unbankable. Banks will not allow them to have certain individuals to have accounts because of past practices of the individuals. What you can do as an alternate to that, if an individual cannot have a bank account, you can issue them a debit card and just reload it every month. And that's the typical procedure for individuals that don't have bank accounts, is you send a debit card and it just gets reloaded every month. And it's one file through the ACH on direct deposit. Just some people are deposit to bank accounts and some people are deposit to their debit cards. So it's an option. It's something that a lot of governments are going to. If the board is interested in moving in that direction, I would be very interested in moving in that direction. I know 3 years ago there was some discussion at the board level and there was some discomfort with going to mandatory direct deposit or debit card. But we can certainly have that conversation again.
Well, we're so much more sophisticated now, James.
Richard and then Jerry.
Did we put a stake in the ground on, from this day forward, no more checks for new retirees?
So when I brought this issue to the board a little over 3 years ago, the feedback I got was you can't force people to do checks, period. We strongly encourage everyone to sign up for direct deposit. And even those who are still, the number getting checks are much smaller than it was 3 years ago. What is the number?
That was my question.
But it is a
one of my
number.
questions, yeah.
So I guess that part of that question is how many folks that retired this year asked for checks? And I guess the follow-up is Jerry's thing about we're more sophisticated 3 years later, and we do a pep run to people. From this day on, nobody that now retires gets a check. And that's less impactful than people taking checks away from them.
What is the number?
I think it's 30 to 40 currently for regular monthly retirement benefits. We still have lump sums that are paid by check, and those are kind of outside the normal monthly retirement process. And there are some reasons that we're still only doing those by check. But if the board wants to have a broader discussion about moving in that direction, I'd be more than happy to entertain that and bring that back for discussion once we've done all the research and can think through everything and bring you a suggestion.
Might this conflict a little bit with our audit issue that's coming up on the horizon? Add confusion to other issues that we're going to be working on. Something to think of.
Possibly, but I'm not sure. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I will say we have made a change that has gotten rid of a significant number of checks every month. So the one process that we used to take was we would run a pre-note file. So if someone wanted to change the bank account that their benefits were deposited to, we need to pre-note that to make sure we have valid routing number and account number in our system. The old process was that we would pre-note as part of the normal retirement benefit process. Well, if you were on a pre-note, you got a paper check that month instead of a direct deposit. So now we've separated, and pre-note is a separate process that we run 5 to 10 days before benefits go out. We test that, make sure we have good information, and then once we validate it, your account information goes into the ACH file, and your ACH continues just going to a different bank account. So those were a significant number of checks every month because of the changing accounts and the pre-note. By separating the process, we've eliminated some paper checks in there as well. So,
Sherry?
How many of, I have a couple questions. How many of the checks that were issued went to somebody in an evacuation zone or an evacuation warning zone?
of
we
the
know?
checks,
Of the checks?
well, I don't know that number off the top of my head.
I was just curious, did we have people contacting us on
We
Monday,
were,
Tuesday
No,
about
we
checks?
had 2 retirees contact us on that Monday just to make sure we were okay.
Oh, okay, nice, okay.
And we actually thought better of it, and Nora and I went through the handful of checks, and I think it's like 40 checks, or it's a small number. We reviewed their addresses. Anyone that was in an evacuation area, we called and emailed and did our best to contact them. We had a few folks who decided to have us mail their check to a different address. We had a few members ask us to hold their checks. We had one that came and picked theirs up. So, and then the mail, anyone we could not reach, we proceeded to mail. Their mail was held at the Clear Lake Post Office or Kelseyville Post Office, and the mail was forwarded later on. Katie's mail was forwarded after she returned home, so we haven't had any issues with not being able to get payments out to our members that were by check.
And how do we print the checks in-house?
yes,
Okay, so we print them in here, and so those are printed on, those are printed Monday or Tuesday, or those are printed when you do the whole ACH file? at the
separate
end of the week?
process. The
But-
ACH is done earlier, the check printing is done much closer to the mail.
And they're mailed on the actual last day, or whatever the day is?
On the issue day.
Okay, and so, and that was part of my question, then the other thing was with the positive pay file, does that not go to the bank at the same time the ACH file go, it's a different process, and
Different process.
who does that and when is that done?
Well, the positive pay file for retiree benefits had already been done.
The positive pay?
Right, this was refunds. Remember refunds?
Okay, well, that's what I was just sitting there
Okay.
thinking, that's typically all kind of done at the same time. So the ACH and the positive pay file was completed at the end of the last week, before Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
usually done well
I
in
just,
advance.
okay, so our biggest issue was checks and people that may have been impacted with checks, particularly in evacuation zones. Okay,
Yeah, but it was the lump sum refunds that were most, and we had retiree checks from retirement benefits that we had to mail, so we didn't have to contact those members, and then the lump sum benefit checks. So.
okay, I was just curious.
Actually, question for Sherry, does the county still issue welfare checks? Many years ago, they switched to an EBT and you had no choice.
And you're loaded on a card, yeah.
So I don't know why we can't do the same thing that the state of California.
I know that we did talk about it when we were doing some of the pension gold. I know there were meetings in here. And the counties looked at it as well. I do think part of it has to do with, in essence, you either do one of those loaded cards or you are forcing somebody to get a bank account that may not be bankable. We still have a couple of people that come into our office every pay period and cash their checks, their payroll checks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do know, we've dealt with, it may not necessarily include our county employees or members, but there are people that are subject to creditor actions where their bank accounts are under a levy. So they don't want that money flowing through their bank account. If it hits their bank account, somebody can grab it. And that is why I'm aware some people don't deposit checks, that they are cashing them. So I mean, it would be interesting, some of those retirees may be cashing them to possibly protect themselves from other actions that we're unaware of. But the debit card may solve that issue.
So it sounds like we want a number of options brought back to the board. Debit card mandatory for those who retire as of the point forward, you know, and that could be.
So that would just be though for the benefit, it wouldn't be for refunds, or whatever else you're talking about, or
Well, it depends.
could be whatever.
We could conceivably do electronic payment only for everyone. I know a lot of state governments have gone that route. I know personally that, because of my experience, state of Oklahoma, if you get a tax refund, your choices are direct deposit or debit card. That's it. For everything you get from the state. There are no more paper checks. So it can be done with the lump sums as well, if we want to. But we need to do the research and see what our options are and what the
Yeah, we don't
costs
even
and implications
send,
are.
we get mostly paper checks in our office, and we don't even send those to the bank. We send a file of copies of those to the bank.
In California, if you pay so much above a certain amount in income tax, you have to pay it by ACH. And once they get you on it, even if your income drops down, you still have to pay by ACH to the state.
Interesting.
Okay, thanks.
Final note on this, in light of everything, I am working on outlining some disaster response processes for us. Separating, we're closing in on finishing the business continuity plan, and now I'm starting to also think about, in light of recent events, what we need to be thinking about in terms of a disaster response, not in terms of the broader county, a declaration of emergency type situation. So we'll be documenting that, getting better at our responses in everything we do. So
I should remember this, I don't, I'll write it off to age, but I know we are having all of our records kept out of state, and then there is a backup, but that backup was 40 miles away is that still the case? Because we can see how 40 miles is inadequate.
right, all of our systems are stored in Springfield with a backup, Springfield, Illinois, with a backup in Bloomington, Illinois, 60 miles away. LRS is working towards more distant backups as well. I think the plan is to keep the 60-mile backup, but then also add another backup further away.
A couple states over.
Yeah, they better
So, yeah,
get cracking.
they're well aware of it, and they are working on it. So I don't know exactly where they are at this point, but they are aware of it.
As far as the disaster response plans, are you working with the rest of the county as a group to address that problem, or is it both specific to this department, and also working together? Because I think everybody's grappling with the same problem.
I have offered to the county to help in any way, shape, or form that I can.
Uh-huh.
If they're thinking about putting something together, I will absolutely put something together for us and our staff, and I'm more than willing to share that with anyone in the county, and have offered to help the county in putting together documents or procedures or whatever to get better at this. Absolutely. So.
Certainly a year ago, we never thought we'd be dealing with it again, and here we are.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I read your report, maybe not remembering correctly, but did you say the county wanted one of the employees to go to animal control to work?
The request that we received was for one of the 2 operations people we had in the office to go to the animal shelter that day, yes.
Do they have experience there, or why would they?
So in the October fires, our staff volunteered in a number of different areas, and I believe that individual sitting at the end of the table had volunteered at the animal shelter after the October fires. No?
No,
Oh.
I was surprised that we got
Oh.
that call.
Did-
Actually,
Okay.
no.
Did you?
So I'm not sure what they would
I mean,
have
do you
had.
guys have animal control?
We did it a lot
Yeah,
in the October fire, yeah.
yeah,
We were taking animals all over the place.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I was,
We had manned the
I don't know.
phone center quite a
Okay.
bit. Katie had done that quite a bit, and I had Kate Nora and I,
Yeah.
I don't know why we got that call.
That was just a place that needed to be filled.
Right.
The call center was probably
We
filled
needed a
first.
body
And
to
then
answer phones or something.
or to help with the animals, maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
I think it's really odd because like our department didn't get any calls. So why pick the retirement affiliation?
It is odd.
From what I understood, a lot of how they started to go down the list was people that worked in October, because they were semi-trained and they had their most current information. There was a lot of problems, I think, with phone numbers from some county employees who maybe had moved and not been contacted, not kept that updated. But from what I understand, once they got past the real initial push, they went to the October records and went to those people. And so that, that might explain why they go to,
And I think
you've already worked,
I think
yes.
another thing that, they're trying to learn from each of these, and one of the things they realized was that they were calling from their county cell phones, but their county cell phones don't identify them as being from HR or the CEO's
Right.
office. It's just a phone number, and so if someone's getting a phone call at early mornings,
They're not
early
gonna
hours-
answer, right.
Yeah, and so I think their intent is to work with information services to somehow change the phones if at all possible, so they
Right.
would say it's an HR. They were calling in at later points, they were calling in from the office, but initially they were calling from home. And I think there's also Health and Human Services, sounds like they had a bit of a phone tree internally that they were able to set up the emergency shelter up at Mendocino College, just with their staff. So it may be that there's a little more of a phone tree organization set up within, maybe even within departments.
And that's what happened in our office. They called my assistant, and then she called 4 or 5 people that were there that first weekend. Pat's bilingual, he's high in demand. And so they really want bilingual just to make sure that they can help everybody. And so, yeah.
So I think lacking that consistent phone tree system
Yeah.
put a little bit extra stress on the few people who are doing most of the phone
There was a
calls.
lot of lessons learned, but I think that's what they did though, as far as why they called people that they did call, because they had that information, and it just, I think the thought that they were somewhat trained, particularly those in the call center, they'd been through it, they'd already done the call center, so there wasn't as much training involved in that kind of stuff, and it hasn't been that long ago, unfortunately. Yeah.
I have a question. So I'm a volunteer here. Would that extend if I wanted to volunteer during an emergency to assist the
So
county?
that question came up, and I believe for liability reasons, that they only wanted county employees, at least in the call center. I'm not sure about some of the other organizations. NCO has a program that helps with the county to organize volunteers.
Yeah, not
for-
in a call center, but
Um,
handling dogs and
So
stuff. Is it
there are
non?
There are volunteers at the animal shelter, and I'm sure many of those people, once contacted, probably were happy to go to the animal shelter because, their animals being brought in under crisis.
And I know the first time in October, with the EOC, search and rescue, that's what they were doing a lot of, was going around and they were taking the calls where somebody had to leave an animal, go check on my animal, go feed my animal, and they were actually getting into the fire zones, being escorted in and taking care of some animals, maybe taking them out kind of thing. But search and rescue, you may want to contact them because they're great volunteer
Yeah,
service,
because they need.
and they're everywhere.
There's
And there
support
was
jobs outside the.
Yeah,
danger
there was a
zone,
lot of
just
them,
the
and
logistic
I think
job.
that's a totally volunteer, you don't have to be a county employee, but they are amazing.
Oh.
What they were doing in October was amazing.
Good
I
idea.
don't know how involved they were here on this one, but in October, they were critical.
If I could just add, in spite of all this, there might be some impression that things didn't really improve from October, but in fact they did in a lot of ways. And so I volunteered for one shift. I lucked out and had a very low call shift at the call center, and but there, this time they had computers set up. You could type in someone's phone or their street address and find out if they were in a mandatory evacuation center or a zone or a voluntary evacuation zone. So previously, which I had not been in the call center, but I was explained that it was all on paper. They just have a map that might have been out of date. So that call center system vastly improved. It's just, there was this, I think, initial wrinkle in terms of how to bring the county employees in. But again, I'm sure they're going to address that. I mean, unfortunately, geez, this fire was in July, and you just think about how dry it is, and we could have a fire to the west of us. Well, to the east of Fort Bragg still, but to the west of Ukiah. And and so later this year, who knows? So I mean, you notice the dozer line they've drawn up onto the west side of Ukiah, up on the hill, when they're trying to prepare. But
Fire breaks.
yeah, but I think people should be prepared for something more later this year.
Yeah, the department head meeting, we had a mandatory department head meeting, and there was a lot of brainstorming going on there on things that that could be done. For one thing, power goes out, you have no landlines. You get what happened over behind Retech, where you had a fiber optic cut. You have no cell phones, and there's a lot of things that people need. If something major really happened, that there needs to be some planning. Unfortunately, I believe there's only one person. The whole emergency operation, I think, is just a one-person.
Do you want Rick
office.
Keller? Is EOS?
I think, yeah, it's just one person. So there's been some successes since the October fire, but it's one person, and I think it is going to need to be more of a team and maybe even more of a community effort. But there's issues. I mean, we could all lose our phones. Then what? How do you get employees to go in and help? Whether that's setting up some place that if your family's safe and you can work, show up here, whatever. I mean, there's some issues that we still have to deal with.
Yeah, and have my office like 3 blocks from Coffee Park.
Oh.
I mean, it's like,
Oh, gosh.
holy smokes. I mean, now we really look at our town here,
Yeah.
Ukiah, and go, gee, a fire could burn the whole town down. I mean, it's like something I never thought of.
Yeah,
I
that was
mean,
it was
but
kind of
now
beyond
it's
your,
like, it can
yeah,
happen.
it was beyond your imagination before October, but not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah, well, that was the one thing, when I was just actually getting back to town when a lot of this was going on, and my son from Windsor was there, and his whole thing was, okay, I'm gonna go get gas, I'm gonna go to the ATM and get cash, I'm gonna go, it's like he was already like, okay, it's like he was already moving, because it's like, that's a problem. I mean, people didn't have gas, they didn't have cash, there was a lot of issues, so yeah, definite planning that the entire community needs to do.
Don't minimize animal control, because I had to leave one of my 2 cats, and they sense your panic.
Oh, yeah.
And they take off, and I don't know, it was a real eye-opener. And I live in the hills, and I've always expected fire. And here we had the 2 on either side, and then we have one at Vichy Springs, and then we have supposedly arson a few nights later. This was...
That's when I left.
Yeah, if there isn't a wake-up to the whole community, these fires were it.
So was there any feedback to the board or any action around the public shaming of people that occurred?
Didn't come from the board.
I mean, did you guys get feedback? Or did you guys discuss it with staff?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, you're saying the board, are you talking about this board?
Board of Supervisors?
Okay, just wanted to be perfectly clear what the question was.
Yes.
Well, it didn't come from the board.
Okay, so that's a no. I mean, I think it was very unfortunate how that all came down publicly without much information.
There was a letter that went out from the CEO's office, a CIU, and the sheriff. I don't know if that made it out to all employees yet, but it did go out to, it did, okay.
Took SEIU off.
Got it, okay. That did go out to all the county employees to sort of try to alleviate some of the concerns and the fact that, you know, the initial statements that were made, some of that might not have been fully the case. That, you know, there were issues with reaching some people that didn't respond didn't even realize that they were supposed to respond. People had missed calls, but no
Right.
voicemails. You know, that was true of people that I knew, where they weren't aware they'd been contacted. So that letter did go out, but I don't think that's made it into the paper or anything like that. But it has gone out to employees.
That's good.
Are you referring at all to the article in the County Daily Journal? Because in that, the one that I read, I didn't appreciate them mentioning which departments were whatever.
No, I'm with you there. I watched the video of the board meeting where the knockdown, or whatever you want to call it, of county employees occurred by two leaders of our organization. And I just thought that was unfortunate.
Which organization?
The county of Mendocino. And that's why I asked if there was any discussion at the board level. And it's a very stressful period for those leaders as well as the people they were addressing. And nothing good could come of it.
I'm gonna share that email with you.
Sounds like fake news.
Well, I mean, I was sitting there hearing those comments, not anticipating those comments, not knowing they were coming, and so, you know, it was supposedly information from authoritative figures. You
Yeah.
know. It did seem to me that those were comments that were better applied at a department level meeting rather than a televised board meeting. But I'm not either of those individuals.
Right. You are a boss, though, and the board is a boss.
Okay.
Um,
Tim?
Yeah, it's completely unrelated, but since we're doing the administrative report. I read the police log, and the other day I read that someone called in and reported a homeless camp being set up on Kings Court. Are we still having a problem with that? They didn't say what address at Kings Court, they just mentioned Kings Court.
I am not aware of us having any issues on our property, other than,
We were for a while back in that.
oh yeah, we took care of that. That's been secured. Occasionally, in the past, there has been one or two people behind the building. I'm not aware of that still taking place at all. To my knowledge, the only issue we have left is people walking across our parking lots and jumping the fence to go to properties behind us.
Or coming from
Or,
another property. The fence is low. So
Yeah.
They just climbed the fence.
so, that's the only issues that I'm aware of at this point. Judy, are you hearing from the state in Suite A about any issues over there?
You know, we did have an issue with some vandalism.
Oh, yes.
We, if you noticed that the State Department of Rehabilitation sign has been removed from the building, they actually were able to unscrew the brackets that held it to the building. They took those brackets, they left the sign, thank goodness, and we're making arrangements to get that replaced. We're not quite sure why they
Just look
decided
around
they
town.
wanted that sign, but thank goodness they left it behind and gave up their efforts, so.
But they took the
They
bracket.
wanted the brackets.
They-
The
they
only
were- yeah.
suspicion,
That's scary.
my suspicion
I thought it was copper.
is they thought it was metal, and the brackets are metal, but the sign is actually a polycarbonate. When they got the sign off, they realized it wasn't metal, so they threw it down and walked off with what little they could salvage. So, that's pure speculation on my part, but we're working on getting that rectified now. So,
They probably meant the creek access
It-
area,
it could be,
because there's still a problem over there.
That's a ground zero, truly.
Yeah.
The corridors of crime.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, returning to the administrative report, plan frequently asked questions. I've gotten no suggestions for additional questions from the trustees. That document, I'll be working on crafting responses and expect to have that completed at some point in the not too distant future. September, we will be meeting in Fort Bragg at the Harbor Light Lodge, the downstairs meeting room. We have been advised that the Wi-Fi at the Harbor Light may not offer as much download bandwidth as what we are accustomed to. So if you would download the documents onto your devices at home before traveling over there, that might make things better for all of us. Just want to throw that out there. We will be starting at 10. Cal will be there. They'll give the investment update. I'll do the talk that I give to the civic groups, and then we'll have other issues.
Why not 8:30 for those of us that have to make 8:30 and you guys?
Are you feeling picked upon?
You are just one, Richard.
Well, years ago, I learned the drive from the coast to inland takes shorter, it takes less time than from you guys to the coast.
Right,
It's
I guess that's your
basic physics.
And the sun is in your eyes going this way.
The investment consultant RFP will be released to the website on Friday. You have the legislative report. There are some legislative items in there that were approved, have been signed and chaptered. And then the last item, or it's the penultimate on the list here, so I got a question from another SACRS plan about interest in increasing the per diem for appointed trustees. Their question was, are any other plans interested in that? There's been, in the discussions back and forth, there's been a lot taking place since I put this on the administrative report. They're still gathering information. Is that something that this board wants to potentially sign on for, advocate, mildly support, or disinterestedly watch from the sidelines?
Did they say what they want to increase it to?
They did not say what they wanted to increase it to. They just expressed an interest in increasing it.
So we are $100 a meeting?
Yes.
Okay, and so the reason it was $300 on the bills that were paid like in June is because they get
Quarterly.
paid quarterly?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I figured, okay.
Yes.
Lee, you're the one who misses work.
Not anymore. I don't miss work.
What do you think, I'm on vacation?
So,
You know, if we had a fast enough meeting, we could be making $100 an hour. You know, if we're only here for an hour, I don't know that I support a raise.
so
That's fine.
for those who don't live in this area, you and you, do you get reimbursed for mileage coming here?
I bet we do if we submit.
I don't submit because the county already gives me a monthly car allowance, and I don't claim the $100 meeting.
I have never submitted, and if I don't know that it's probably a policy you could submit.
Well, there's that, and then like the distance and the safety factor, driving those roads at night, you know, the option to spend the night here, or let's say spend the night, I mean, I'm thinking, personally, I think, you know, $100 is not very much of a stipend, but I don't know why, are we doing it to compensate people coming here, or, you know, what is our bottom line purpose for doing it?
The law says they get it.
They get it, okay.
That's why we do it.
I don't know that it's,
Well, unless someone doesn't claim it.
Well, we actually process it automatically. There's not a claim.
Well, I'm not getting that $100.
Well, I don't think county's.
You're not
paid for it.
allowed.
Yeah,
It's only appointed non-employees.
Right.
You're a county employee, so you're not entitled to it.
Oh, I thought Catherine was double dipping here.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, no.
It's only the 4 of you.
Three of us.
And Richard, 4.
I count on that money.
Kathy?
Kathy?
3, yeah. So, because you're 3, it's the 3 board appointees, right? Other than Dan
The-
and then
and-
Richard.
The
Retired
retirees.
member.
The retirees.
Oh, you too? Oh, so
Right.
5.
Okay, so there are elected members that are entitled to it because they're not county employees, yes.
So 5 people on this board, so half?
Yes.
I don't, yeah, I would leave it up to the
Was
people
that
that are
system
taking
having
care of all.
difficulty with recruitment for trustees? Is that, I mean, do we know what their motivation
I
is?
that
I
why
don't
you
know
do
what the
it for the
motivation
$100?
is. It's a
Is that
system
why?
that has.
Well, I have
Me
to
too.
agree.
Is that why you do
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
Beer money.
It's Orange County.
Okay.
They have very
Or
long
wine
meetings
money.
and they have them twice a month. They're
Wow.
all-day meetings,
Oh, wow.
twice a
I was
month.
gonna say it goes into the
That
wine
makes
pot.
So,
I guess you get $100 a month and it isn't about the meeting. It is about getting here, it's about reading the packet, it's about going to training.
Right.
There's a lot more to it than the time we spend in this room, for sure. And that's not a pitch for making it higher, that's just, I think some people in the community also think that's, well, you guys show up once a month and hang out for a little bit. But there's a lot of responsibility in this. And that's, you know.
So is Orange County trying to make it just for them, or are they trying to make it for the
No.
whole entire
no, it was,
Sackers?
their question was, is anyone else interested in this? And they didn't provide any specifics other than a higher number,
Like to join in with them?
Yes.
though?
potentially.
Or just support it.
Right, right. I think the question I got from Steve Delaney, the CEO at OSERS, was, is anyone else interested in this? It wasn't specific, will you support it, will you co-sign? It was, is anyone else interested in this? I have learned since then that it was pursued at one point, but the legislation was not successful because there was objection from the counties and cities, and related to if this stipend was raised for this board, would that be a precedent for every other board? And there are a lot of boards and commissions where members are not compensated in any way. So,
Yeah, I mean, I've served on a lot of boards and commissions over the years, and this is the first one I've ever gotten a paycheck.
Oh.
And so, you know, I didn't join, you know, come on this board for the pay. I mean, it's a volunteer, the $100 is just a token, really, and, you know, it's just a token.
Yeah, and
People are
CalSTRS,
volunteering to be.
3-day meetings, so typically, and if you came again during the month and had a meeting, you would get another. So it used to
Was
be
it 100?
$100 a day for every day.
Oh,
So,
okay.
you know, like when we do our retreat, we only get $100 for one day, even if we're there 2.
the law says for us per meeting.
Ah, gotcha.
I do pay you
Sorry.
for the ad
Huh?
hoc committee meetings.
Oh, good, thank you.
And audit and budget committee.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not hearing any overwhelming desire to sign on to that, so I will communicate that.
Like, why don't we just stay neutral on it?
I
They've
mean, unless
got
the
a
5 that
reason.
get it, want, you know, feel there's a need to have it raised.
Somebody share a story, this same kind of issue came up back in the 90s in regard to enhanced retirement for public safety, 3% at 50, aka 3% at 50, and at CSAP, there was a big debate about that. And the final answer was neutral, be neutral.
Mhm.
The argument against it was domino theory, which was mentioned. And what happened to domino theory occurred. Though at a level far beyond $100 to $200 per
Yeah,
meeting.
big time, yeah.
But it's the same kind of, you know, kind of political, let's be neutral, let's support, let's not support. Observation.
Well, I would be willing to support Orange County in their endeavor to pursue this, but not that we're gonna want that for our retirement board.
Okay.
If we supported it, I would I would let anybody say we can increase it if we want to a certain
Yeah.
amount.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Give them a choice.
yeah.
Well, and, or the legislation that might work through the legislature might say something to the fact that you might tier it based on the size of the investment fund. I mean, I'm sure Orange County has a very large investment fund, therefore the day-long meetings twice a month versus a smaller organization that is not gonna have, it has all the same responsibilities, but maybe not quite the complexity.
Well, and then even if they have a maximum, and then each system can decide for themselves what, up to that maximum, what they want to do. We could leave it at 100, or we could raise it to 200, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I'm just thinking there might be some logic in a tiering
Tier,
system,
yeah.
because, I mean, there was the issue of the chartered cities, which gave a black eye to all cities, unfortunately, because there were a handful down in Southern California, and because they were chartered, they weren't
Yeah.
controlled by the normal state legislation that caps council salaries, and so you had that
Yeah.
weird thing going on. Anyway, I think the state's addressed that issue now, but
Yeah.
it was just a handful of cities, and because they were charter
Right.
cities.
Well, this is just such a minimal amount too. It's like,
Unless there are any other questions, that concludes the administrative report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So next we have some closed session items.
Number 7, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we have general board member discussion. Do we have any general board member items that, go ahead.
I do. I was able to have a very charming escort to the college gala, College Foundation Gala, and Dr. Wilbanks agreed to accompany me, and
Who is the chairman?
and I thought it was a really good opportunity for James to see more of the folks who contribute and are a part of our community, and for them to meet him. It's amazing how many people he knows already. So he's not just, that stranger from Oklahoma anymore.
Bring your wife and kids next time.
Yeah, that would. He got her permission before he accepted.
Oh, I didn't mean it that way.
Anyway, just a suggestion, if you're going to something and James is free, I think it raises the whole level of, who our soon-to-be executive director is, and what he does here in the community to counter some of the negative. And I believe James had an opportunity to speak with some people who lead the negative against this board and what we do. So I thought it was a well done request by me, and a well done, an attaboy for James for accepting. So please, other board members, take that opportunity as well.
Well, thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to do any of those types of outside events at your pleasure or suggestion. So,
I invited him to our triathlon. Do you think he?
My wife was on the college board for many years, and we sort of got soured when we learned that the only way we could get teachers at the college to go is if they got free tickets, and they would act incensed if the president even suggested that they go to an event that people were volunteering up the wazoo and raising a lot of money to support their endeavors at the college, and they couldn't get up the gumption to provide any support for themselves. That did not sit well with us.
did I hear that was the last one?
It's the last one, yeah. The portfolio is now large enough that.
Sustainable.
Yeah.
Well, and it was getting tired, I mean,
Right.
it just,
Yeah, well,
you
Right,
gotta,
it's not fresh.
there's a
Right.
ripple effect,
Right.
and they'll do it again in a few years.
Right. It's nice to just take a little break for all the people who worked so hard to put it on.
Yeah.
It really was nice, having been on the foundation board for a long time. I thought it was the best of all of them.
Good.
Mhm, yeah. And the simplest.
Yeah.
And the sound system was the best. They didn't use a staff member.
And bless Mother Nature and/or whomever else, the skies cleared on
And the
Saturday.
temperature.
And the temperature was down, yeah.
Okay, all right, any other board member items?
I watched a webinar, a Calvin webinar. I cannot remember what it was called. It was about a month ago, but it was about the metrics of your managers and your advisors. And I thought it was a very worthy thing to watch, considering the RFP we're putting out there. So if you go on the Calvin site, you can find it. And I believe the title had something to do with picking your consultants. But it was good.
So I have a question because I took one of those Callum webinars and I thought they were gonna email to people some follow-up documents and I never did get something. So I don't know, has other people
I
taken this?
didn't, on this one, I didn't follow
Okay.
it down.
I just have one question of, I wonder how many people were going to this.
I have to, I need continuing education.
Okay. Well, that's great.
I've done mine.
Well, I actually have some that can move, but I need some continuing education for them.
I've never
Is it
been to a
cheap?
Sackers event.
You'll sell it
so-
cheap?
They're great.
It's a good place to go
Do
to
anything for $100.
in November. It's a
Yeah,
great place
good
to go
one,
to.
yeah.
If you're both close.
Okay, my apologies, I did not include this. Just for the board's knowledge, in 2 weeks, I'll be at Pepperdine for the Calipers Principles of Pension Management for Trustees. So I'll be there. I'm responsible for the session on governance, shocking. And then we'll be co-leading the team exercise. Looking forward to that.
From Pepperdine, you look right down at my old house,
Oh,
right there on the beach. Great place to grow up.
I might suggest a break
Yeah.
before we start closed session.
All right, well, yeah, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back at 5 minutes to 10.
And there's snacks in the break room.
we may have to go check those out.
Thank you, Judy.
So we have 3 items on closed session. One is to consider the hearing officer's proposed decision in Gail Sanders' application for service-connected disability retirement. The second is the performance evaluation for the retirement administrator. And third is conference with labor negotiators, Jerry Harris, Sherry Shatmeyer, Catherine Smith, and Patrick Sullivan regarding negotiations with the retirement administrator.
Okay, thanks. We'll go on closed session.
All right. You good, Scott?
Unanimously voted to approve and adopt the hearing officer's decision in the Gail Sanders case to grant a service-connected disability retirement, and also direction was given to staff and council. There's nothing to report in the performance evaluation, and the last item, direction was given to the labor negotiators.
Okay, with that, we're going to adjourn at 9 minutes to 11, or 9 minutes to noon.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just need to